final year PhD student at Rice University. And I'm really excited to be presenting this paper where we are basically introducing this new dataset called BADLAD. It's a multi-domain document layout analysis dataset in Bengali. I'm presenting this on behalf of my collaborators from Bengali AI, SUS from Bangladesh, Brack University, Vanderbilt University, and Rice University, as well as Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. So, document layout analysis has been here for a while. It's very mature, ubiquitous in so many different applications. We've seen applications in conserving history, tracking transactions, financial documents, so many things, right? There are newer ideas where document analysis can be used to create new text for large language models, especially for multilingual, like other languages where there's not enough text online that's good quality. So you can use DLA to parse like books and get more text for language models. There's also the idea of using DLA for general purpose image understanding. So you have an image with a very different layout from what you would get and what the models right now can work on. And then that is somewhere where we need document analysis to be able to do general purpose document understanding. One thing that's lacking for all of these directions is that a lot of the research thrust is in the direction of English or like languages that are more prevalent. And Bengali or low resource languages sort of lag in the direction of document analysis. So, like one question comes to mind, like why can't we just take the English models, the models that are trained on English, and then do some fine tuning for Bengali? It's actually not that trivial a task. For example, if you think of like PubLanet or DocBank, a lot of these documents are born digital, meaning they were digitized to begin with. They're like scientific articles, so they're digital, and then you also have like all the XML labels or all the ground truth for where the information in the document is, like how the document is actually laid out, right? But if you think of the global south, like Bangladesh, India, over there, a lot of people are still using receipts that are not standardized, and they're like writing on their receipts to do transactions. So there are a lot of documents that are not digital that are being used over there, and document analysis needs to be able to like adapt and work for them as well. Another example is in DocBank, the way the data is annotated is by using non-overlapping, vertically oriented rectangular boxes. So when you're thinking of just images in the wild, these layouts are not always oriented vertically or horizontally. So you would need polygonal annotations, and like they could be very wildly like distributed over the images, right? So these are like sort of the gaps that we see, and that's why we went forward and created BADLAD, which is short for BADLAD document layout analysis dataset. So this is a multi-domain dataset of 30,000 documents, which are all human annotated. We have 700,000 annotations coming from 6 different domains. Historical newspapers, new newspapers, government documents, magazines, books, property deeds, liberation war documents. So there are a lot of historical sources as well as like newspapers, modern documents as well. All of these images are basically scanned. So these are like scanned, like these documents where like, even if they were born digital, they were printed, and then like our collaborators and our team, we scanned these documents and then we collected them. We also sourced a lot of them online. And we're doing polygonal annotations on these documents, where the polygons, they can overlap. So this is quite a challenging task in terms of annotation. The way we started is we basically manually scanned and captured a lot of historical newspapers, government documents. To begin, we scraped PDFs from online sources. Basically, all of these documents are Bengali. We crowdsourced newspapers, property deeds, which are sensitive documents, so we don't necessarily put it in the public releases. There will be like private when we're using these documents. So we begin with this big chunk of documents. Then we train a self-supervised SWOG model on it to look at the prototypes and see like what are the layout variations that we see in the SWOG clusters. So from there, we find that there are, from our collected data set, we have like 4 main semantic types that we're going to annotate. It's going to be images, text, paragraph, and tables. No lists. For lists, what we do is like we label all of the constituents of a list by either text box or paragraph. We have a number of lists where not that prevalent in the SWOG clusters. We anonymize these samples, and then we create a candidate data set that we annotate, and also we validate as we are annotating. So this is like to the right. You would see one example where we have like image, text, paragraph, and table annotations. So the thing to notice here is that for the images, you see there are like polygonal text overlaps that are also annotated in our data set for like any table, image, or text overlaps. This was affordable to maintain. The annotation platform that we use is Labelbox. So we had like 13 different annotators on our team that we trained. We hired them, trained them to use Labelbox. We did this continuous validation annotation where we annotated and we kept validating as the data was being annotated, so we can update the protocol if there are any mistakes. If there's something that's lacking, we can update the protocol as it improve. Because there are a lot of like edge cases that come up, and the annotators would come to us and then say, oh, how do I label this? So we need to keep validating as it's being labeled and then like updating our protocols. So we had like 2,000 hours of active annotation. We annotated 33.7 thousand documents with 710,000 polygons from the 60 domain. If you look at the stats of the collected documents, we see that a large chunk of the documents are coming from the magazines and books domain. The reason is the magazines and books domain itself has so much diversity and variations in it that a lot of the samples that we're annotating is coming from there. Because there are comic books, there are like regular poetry, so there's just text and paragraphs. There are a lot of diversity there that we get annotated. Another interesting thing to see is that the historical newspapers domain, so for every domain we also have the annotation time required to annotate it, so that's sort of like a proxy for how hard it was to annotate that domain, right? So we see that for historical newspapers, the average annotation time per sample was the highest, and that's because like historical newspapers we've seen have a lot of small text boxes and like a lot of different paragraphs. So there are a lot of smaller elements that we had to label separately. So looking at the number of polygons or annotations that are on a page. So in this figure, on the x-axis we have the number of polygons on a page, on a given page. And on the y-axis we have how many documents have that number of polygons, right? So this is a histogram. And it's log scale, the y-axis is log scale. So we see that most of the, the larger chunk of the data is shifted towards the left. So most of the documents, they don't have that many polygons per page. But we see that if you look at historical newspapers, they are a little bit shifted toward, like, they start from around 100 and go toward, they move towards the tail. So historical documents, we see that there are a lot of polygons that are present in each sample. Same for some of the magazines and literature. So there's like a lot of the magazines and literature samples are towards the left, so lower polygon frequency, but then like there are also like there's another mode over there where there are a lot of polygons per page for magazines and documents as well. This shows like how diverse the particular domain is, the magazines and literature domain. We also look at the area covered by different annotation types. So if you think of like just one single document, you can take one polygonal annotation and like calculate like how many of the pixels are covered by one polygon, right? So we are looking at the different semantic coverage per domain, where like after annotation. So if you look at government documents, you see that not a lot of the pixels are covered by images, so they're not like whatever images are there in the government documents, they're very small, so they're not covering that much area. Right? There's a lot of tables which cover like a large percentage of the data. None of these numbers are going to sum up to 100 because there can be overlaps. Right? So there can be polygons that overlap, and so there's more area under annotations compared to the area of the document. And in historical newspapers, new newspapers, more document, magazines, and books, we see that paragraphs are very prevalent and they cover a lot of the area in the data sets. We also look at the spatial distribution of these annotations on each of these documents. So what we can do is we can take a document and then like reshape it to a square and then look at how much hits we are getting for any annotation type for a given pixel. So what we're seeing here is, for example, for the images for the leftmost plot, what we would see is that we see quite a sort of like a uniform distribution of images on the documents. For the tables, we see that there is like a margin from the edge of the document, which we expect. Text boxes, there is this like subtle spike at the top of the page, and that would be like contributed by the titles. We're not separately annotating the titles because there is this ambiguity between titles, headers, and all that. Paragraphs, we also see that this is like sort of uniform, but then we see the lines for the columns of the document. Right? So we do some benchmarking where we basically split the data set into 60-40 by book or by the source from which we're getting the samples. Then we are doing two different tasks. So we do a bounding box task where we turn the polygons into bounding boxes, and then we train and test using bounding box annotations. And we do a mask task where like the polygons are polygons, and we're basically doing segmentation study, right? So we are looking at mean average precision for this, and we're like comparing a lot of different models over here. What we see is that for YOLO V8, like in our preliminary results, we see that YOLO V8 does a good job in general in most of the domains. The mask task, the polygon semantic segmentation task is much harder than the bounding box task, which makes sense. We also see that property deeds, so like I was saying before, we keep property deeds only in the test set and we don't keep it in the training set, so it's sort of out of distribution. And we see that it, like, as expected, property deeds is where the model fails the most. It's also quite challenging because property deeds, it has logos, it has signatures, and there's a lot of handwritten stuff during those samples, so it's like one of the harder domains. Of the semantic types, table is one of the hardest types to label in our data set. We do see some domain-wide variances in tables. For example, if you look at Liberation War documents, the tables are like easier to classify over there compared to like the other domains. So between these domains, the hardness of classifying one of the semantic types could change. So it could be that tables are easy in Liberation War, but it's harder in some other images. It's harder in Liberation War, but it's easier in others. So there's a domain-wide variances that we can explore when we're training our models to better understand like where the DLA methods are failing. Yeah, like I said, like image it varies domain-wise, table it varies domain-wise. These are just preliminary benchmarks where we are training these models, which are pre-trained on ImageNet, PubLayNet, or COCO, on these bounding box and segmentation tasks. These are some examples where we can see that to the leftmost example, there's like this multilingual aspect in it. There's Arabic text. So this is an example that's coming from a religious book where there's Arabic and Bengali as well, and the model was able to do somewhat good in segmenting the Arabic text as well. The middle image is like a failure case. This is a historical document, historical newspaper where there are a lot of small paragraphs and titles to label, and that's where like the model failed. So all of these are for the YOLO segmentation task, to the best of my knowledge. And the rightmost is just a new newspaper, which is easier for the trained YOLO model to work. So we did a benchmarking competition on our data set as well. So this is like a benchmarking data set, why not throw a competition at it? And we had a lot of participants who tried out different models. I think this is more representative of what models are good. So people tried out multi-scale VIPs, mass transient with feature pyramids, layout LM, YOLO. And over there we see that the best performing models are the multi-scale bits. And we also look at the runtimes, and the fastest ones are the YOLO based methods. So with this, I end my presentation. I'm very thankful for you guys listening to what I'm saying. Please check out our codes, check out our websites. Bengali AI, we're like a community initiative where we have a lot of people working together to create data sets. So if anybody's interested to work with us to create data sets, just ping us. Thank you so much.